Hey guys, Analog Man here to actually do something different than usual. As you can see from the title, today's video is focusing on security control. Um, for most people that have played this deck in the Digimon TCG, or even if they've been playing since the OCG, they know how crazy this deck can get and how adaptable it can become. I mean, the thing is with the deck, it's a very weird deck. Like for anybody that has either played it or has played against it, from personal experience, I actually played against a friend who had a really weird build of it. It was like a yellow blue version originally, but for me, it was later, like me actually trying it out eventually around BT5. Yeah, right around when BT5 came out, I managed to actually pull about in each of my boxes. I actually pulled at least four Zwart defeats. And after seeing that, I was like, okay, what am I going to do with these guys? Do I play purple? Do I play in black? But both options didn't really seem really appealing to me, especially since I wasn't really a fan of Lilith Loop or Chaos Gallant or any of those decks that utilized it. That was until I actually found Security Control, which at that point was yellow, black, red versions essentially. And honestly, at that point, that essentially became my permanent deck. I do say that the main deck of this channel is Machine Dramon, but at the same time, Security Control is actually the one that I usually main in competitive uh, tournaments essentially. Like in most of my very first 2 to 3 regionals online were actually using security control, and those were probably some really hilarious matches. I honestly wish at that point I had started this channel already, because I would have posted some hilarious tie battles. I ended up actually going, I think I got like 6 ties in one of the regionals, but it was crazy. I had so much fun with that deck. And with BT6 coming out, it just made the deck even more insanely fun, because before, the main issue of security control was the lack of removal, and that essentially held the deck back from essentially being completely tier 1 essentially. It was like, honestly, in BT5, the best way to describe it would be the fact that it was very, I don't know, I would say it was very tier 1.5-ish. Like it could top events, it could do very well, but it had to hit just the right thing to, or right deck to play against to essentially succeed. And in my case, I usually went up against some stuff that I never even would be able to take on, so it was just kind of rough half the time. For me, honestly, BT6 has been insanely crazy, and it's just like this deck still can check most decks. Even the fact that originally I was scared of Jessamon, I do not fear Jessamon or Gobblebon or any of the top tier decks anymore at the moment, especially since I have the tech of Sakuyamon now finally, which is like one of the best cards ever made for security control, which I never looked at until recently. Or actually, I had, but I never knew if it would be successful. But now that having tested it against Gabumon and Jessamon, it is insanely amazing. But anyway, yeah, let's actually get into talking about this deck essentially. So the strengths of this deck are lots of healing. That's the best way, honestly, to describe it. I have had matches where I've actually gotten to many, like at least 10 to 9 security. It is insane how much defense this deck has and how much it can output half the time, because with all the cards you run, you can potentially keep your security above 5 for at least half the game or more. Along with that, there's also the fact that it has consistent and constant pressure on your opponent, especially with the release of BT6. You have access to board wipes and essentially specific targeting like Wyvern's Breath, which is hard destroy a lot of decks. And along with that, there's Iron Fist and Gawalt Swarmer. Those cards, along with all the old cards, just make this deck insanely powerful and a huge hassle for most decks to play against. Along with that, as I mentioned while I was describing my personal experiences about security control, this deck has a really good matchup against almost every single tier 1 deck, especially all the Bond decks and Jessamon decks at the moment, and it is crazy how you can just, with just a simple addition of maybe 2 to 3 cards, like say Sakuyamon or even Craniumon, or even possibly maybe Hexablow if you really wanted to, you can just answer almost anything in your locals, which is insane. And not only that, is that because of all the healing and the constant pressure, you can essentially outgrind your opponents resource wise, and they just can't do anything about it because they're losing their board and they have to reset up everything. And the only way they can really do that half the time is to essentially keep their guy in raising, which some decks like say Jesmon or Gobblebon does. But Sakuyamon, as I mentioned, hard counters that, which is insane. And then Crania, or even if you really wanted to, I've seen some people doing it where they teched in Rebellimon into the deck, and it is amazing how it can just do anything at this point. And along with that, as I've already explained with how it can grind out, the fact that this deck can just adapt to anything. Like for example, in BT5, my deck was super unique because my locals actually had a lot of Diaboro decks and a lot of the other meta decks. So I had to actually adapt my deck to counter almost everything in my locals, and I managed to do it by putting in Mechanoris and Shuckomons of all things, and those things actually helped me beat past a lot of those things. As long as the Diablo deck wasn't a weird, was it a yellow black one where it had Spiral Masquerade, I would basically win every Diablo matchup in that case, and almost every other deck had like such a hard time getting through my board. It was insane. Yeah, those are all the strengths, but at the same time, the deck also has a lot of weaknesses. But no deck is perfect. Honestly, every deck has its weakness, especially in Digimon. With security control, it hard loses at the moment to Delicate Plan. Delicate Plan is one of the most annoying red cards, and Jesmon, especially my build that I have for Jesmon, I run 3 copies of that thing. And once you get that out and you swing for like 6 security, it's basically done at that point. If they have an Omni, it's game. Because no matter what, you're not going to be able to either heal hard enough or be able to get rid of enough of their board to survive the next turn, which is really bad. But at the same time, that's just how it is sometimes. That's how it is playing against Jesmon or red decks in general. There's also the fact that there exists a red War Greymon that can essentially negate options the turn he is summoned and attacks. So essentially, with how red goes, they're guaranteed 3 swings into your security without triggering anything, which sucks. I mean, at that point, you might the best thing to hope for would be to hit into a security Digimon or possibly a tamer, which the deck does run about 4 to 5. So hopefully that's how it goes down. But most of the time, it's gonna be like wasted option cards that could have popped their board, which it sucks, but it happens. Along with that, in EX1, we will be getting a new white option card that costs 3 in the form of Emergency Shutdown. This card actually hard stops both, actually not just security control, but it also stops 3 Musketeers. It basically makes it so until basically your opponent's next turn, they basically cannot trigger options. And considering the fact that security control is about, was it 2/3, maybe I would say honestly 50-50 of the deck at this point is option cards. So it's that card hurts a lot, and a lot of people can easily tech this in, especially since EX1 also has the addition of Analog Boy, which a lot of people are going to be playing in their decks to help cycle through stuff. And with that and in combination with Emergency Shutdown, your opponent will get a lot of advantage and be able to essentially destroy you next turn. So it's what it is. At this point, the best way to do against it would be to adapt, which I will talk about in a second. Along with that, there are still the weird rogue decks. Like, for example, Diaboro still actually comes back in Classic Collection, and that deck is pretty scary because it can output a lot of tokens on board, and if you aren't prepared for that matchup, they can kill you really fast, even if you have like 10 security. There's also I've actually seen a few people in my locals actually starting to run Black War Greymon in red now because of the new red Megadramon. It allows you to just evolve a black on top, and they're using the old black promo Black War Greymon, which is really powerful, especially in red, because you can just make a gigantic stack and just continuously hit along with Delicate Plan. You are basically guaranteed like maybe 6 security with just that one guy, and then the next turn you just finish it off with another guy that's already in your raising. So it's pretty rough. Same with green OTK is still real. It's still around and it's still really scary. So occasionally you will run into it. Security control doesn't have an issue with it, but it's just like if you don't draw the right hand or you don't have the removal to get rid of their stuff that turn, it is kind of rough. So just be on the lookout for that. But yeah, um, but the main question is that what's in store for the future? Well, in the future, I've noticed that a lot of security control decks, for them to remain relevant in Classic Collection, especially, they actually had to shift away actually from too much options. I noticed that they actually reduced down their options and they went back to kind of like the old style with just more Digimon essentially. And it does make sense because with the release of Classic Collection, we do get a lot more power in hard playing level 6 Digimon. We actually do get a new purple level 6 in the form of Piedmon, who actually pops an entire board of level 4 or lower that are unsuspended. And most of the time, your opponent's going to have a field of a lot of, like, maybe rookies or something, or level 5s or less. So that card has a lot of potential. Along with that, the increase in running more of the security Cordramon and Geo Gray could be a potential option because with how those cards work, you can essentially draw into what you need and just save it for next turn. And then after that you can just like hard play them and just get either removal or draws. So potentially those could be the main thing. And of course there's also another cool option that I've been seeing around where people are shifting it back towards more of a yellow base, so you do have access to like Bushi Agumon and potentially using Mastamon to evolve and get rid of their security faster, and of course bringing back Bushi to swing for game. Along with that, there's also a lot of really good level 7s that you can actually run in a deck, especially Omnimon X. Omnimon X is still a very solid card in the deck. It just depends on your player preference if you want to run it in your deck. For me, I try to run at least one copy because you never know. There's moments where you want to swing for game, and having him pop something on the board for you is really nice. Along with that, there's also the actual option of even running emergency shutdown in your own deck to stop their emergency shutdown, basically, which is kind of redundant if you think about it. There's also the new blue option card, Ice Wall, which could potentially help out, but at the same time, it is an option card. And with the fact that people will be teching in emergency shutdown to stop your deck, you will have to adapt to that. And then along with that, after Classic Collection is done, and depending on when we get it here in the TCG, we're going to be having to deal with hybrids. Well, with hybrids, you don't have that big of an issue anymore, but at the same time, the fact that hybrid decks are so fast, the only way to actually survive is to do more healing. And actually, there will be a new purple card coming out that actually helps pop boards, essentially. It's a purple option card. I'm not sure on the name, but it is really broken because essentially in the future, Security Control will be running at least 8 tamers to kind of adapt to the hybrids, but with those tamers in conjunction with the option card that I'm talking about, it will allow you to essentially pop your board up to the number of tamers and or hybrids on your board. So if you have like 4 tamers, you're guaranteed 4 pops with it, which is really nice. And it seems like emergency shutdown is still there in hybrid format, but at the same time, it's not really there because the problem is that the majority of the meta essentially becomes just Digimon only and only hybrids. So with that, people kind of shift away from that card, especially because security control kind of falls out of relevance, but at the same time, it's still there. So you have to be really careful with that. And I don't know. It's just with hybrids, it's going to be kind of a weird thing. We'll see once it comes out, but these are just my predictions on how to essentially counter all that. And then after that, we still also have the format where Jogress gets involved, and that's another that's another harsh thing that we're gonna have to deal with because Jogressing allows you to essentially create a new Digimon on the field for 0 cost, which is already incredibly broken, even worse than XYZ monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! For anybody that's played Yu-Gi-Oh! XYZ monsters when they came out, they were insane. And I feel like Jogress is kind of like the new thing of that, where it's just going to be ridiculously broken. I mean, I've already seen in Japan how Jessmon uses it, how Imperial Dramon uses it, or Mastamon uses it. It's just insane how it works. even I think even red and black start using it more. Or normal red and black decks use it, but it's not as prevalent. It's mainly those three decks that use them, and it's insane how powerful that is. I haven't seen really that many security control decks kind of coming out in that part, but I feel like with how adaptable security control is, you can potentially like create a Jogress based security control deck. I haven't seen anybody do it yet at the moment, but I feel like it is possible. It's just gonna take some really out of the box thinking for that. But yeah, anyway, that's my thoughts on security control as of now, and I'm hoping this deck honestly stays relevant because honestly, I love alternate win conditions. I've been a fan of those since I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh back in like, well, probably ever since like the very first format of Yu-Gi-Oh. It's just I like the idea that you don't have to just go with what everybody else goes with. You can go with something like security control where it's just like this jank way of winning. And for anybody that's even in my locals or whatever, they can attest that I love jank along with my other friend Jason, who loves creating jank decks. It's like that out of box thinking is amazing because potentially it can blindside your opponent and your opponent can't adapt to it. While security control can, as I said, adapt to almost anything in the format. So anyway, thank you for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of this video. And let me know about any ideas you might have actually on security control as well, because I would love to make the deck continue on till BT9 if I really wanted to. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you next time.